All right, this video, once again, inspired by one of our viewers, Aftab Khan. Shout out to you for giving me some pretty solid suggestions, always. This one, I'm just going to demystify, if you will, some of the common terms I use on this channel. For the people that are more beginner here, I know a lot of you guys have joined. Love to have you here. I want to make sure we're all on the same page, and I'm not just some guy on the internet spewing technical jargon. You don't know what I'm talking about. So I want to distill a lot of the things that could potentially be confusing for newcomers. What's up, guys? This is Ryan from elevatecyber. We're going to get right into distilling this terminology here. So one terminology that Aftab pointed out, a lot of people might not know what it is when I say APIs, right? Well, an API is short for application programming interface. So basically what that is, if you think of a website, right? Or an application on your phone or your computer, typically that application is meant to be consumed by a user, right? Like you or me or any person, right? Now, what an API is it's an application that instead of being meant to be consumed by another human, it's meant to be consumed by another computer, right? Another program. So I can create an API and it could serve out some data, and the only purpose of it is to serve up this data so that other applications can grab that data and then use it in their applications. So it's made, that's just one such example, right? But any application that's made for another machine to interact with rather than a human. So that's basically what an API is. So most commonly you see it for like getting data, or maybe you can make an API call, right? Which is you're making a request to the API endpoint to get it to create a resource, delete a resource, do something, right? But you're going to interact with it through the code that you create. It's going to be interacting with the API. So as the user, we shouldn't have to interact with an API directly. Rather, the software should be what's interacting with the API. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing there. But yeah, just know that it's made from machine to machine rather than a machine to a human, as in the case of, say, YouTube, right? So tokens. What a token is normally a value that's used for authentication. Not always. You could use a token for anything, really, anything you want to track. Because an HTTP is stateless, so it has no way of knowing, and I'll get into session management in a second, but it's stateless, so it has no way of knowing, are you authenticated, or what's your level of access, or anything like that. So sometimes you have tokens for different things. Now, when we're talking about APIs, a lot of times you have an API token or an API key, and basically what that is a password, I guess you could call it, not really a password per se, but a token, right? It's just a bunch of values, some long unguessable value that you pass, normally in the HTTP header. So if you're not too familiar with the HTTP protocol, don't worry about it, but it's just in the header as opposed to in the body. You pass this API token, typically not in the URL because that's not very secure, but yeah, typically in the header you pass it. And then when you make a request to the endpoint checks, okay, does he have a valid key? Let me check his headers. And if he does, then you're able to make a request to the endpoint. If not, then it's going to give you a forbidden response. So that's just a way to implement security on an API so that only authorized people are able to make requests to the API. The reason that they do that is because a lot of times the reason they do it is because they don't want anyone to make a request to the API and just hammer the API through their program with thousands and thousands of requests and basically do a denial of service on the endpoint. So if they have a system where you have to go on a website and click a button to generate your API key, they can identify you by that API key, and then they can control how many requests that you're making to the server, make sure you're not bringing things down or like spamming the endpoint with too many requests, things like that. But there's a bit of a ramble there. That's all a token is. I don't want to take too much time explaining each of these things. I know we're like 4 minutes in the video already. So next one is session management. Like I was saying, HTTP has no way of, it's stateless. It has no way of knowing who you are after you log in. So that's why typically after you log in, you'll get some cookies which are basically, it could be tokens, different things, right? They're normally in your HTTP headers, and you have these tokens, and these tokens are just a way for the server, every time you make a request, they can validate that, okay, this is a person that's already logged in and they're in this group or whatever, right? So it's a way for them to track you, basically, for access control and things like that. So you want to make sure with session management that you're not disclosing any of the session IDs to another user, right? Because if another user gets a hold of your session ID, then they can do what's called session hijacking, where they can impersonate you, and the server's going to think that they are you because you have their session ID, so they might be able to order something on your behalf, or whatever you can do on the website, they can do as well. So yeah, session management is very important. Now, another more terminology you might have heard is red team, blue team, purple team, right? When it comes to these things, the red team is basically like the adversaries. They simulate the adversary. So they simulate a hacker group, right? And the blue team is the opposite. They simulate the defenders, the people that are trying to detect the red team. So there's kind of this cat and mouse game between the red team trying to covertly, act as the threat actor, and then the blue team trying to detect them. And then when you hear about purple team, that is where the red team and the blue team come together, and they communicate with one another as they test stuff. And they're like, hey, I did this. Were you able to detect that? Here's how I did it. And they're very much working in tandem with each other. A lot of times companies will have their red teams do red team stuff and their blue teams do blue team stuff. And then every once in a while come together for a period of time to do what they call purple team testing, right? Red plus blue is purple. So that's why they call it that. And now, so I just wanted to make that emphasis that these are normally, there's not a separate team typically. It's typically the red and blue team. They're just coming together and they call it purple team exercises. And then when it comes to black, gray, and white box testing, that's another thing you might have heard, like black box testing, white box testing, gray box testing. When people talk about black box testing, what they mean is that you're going to have to test an app or a server or whatever, right? You're going to have to test something, but you're going to have no knowledge of it, really. You're basically going at it blindly. Like if I just said, hey, here's the IP address, try to hack this. That'd be an example of a black box testing scenario. With a white box testing scenario, they're going to give you a lot of information that an attacker maybe could get, right? But they wouldn't have off the bat, right? So they might tell you, here's some credentials to the server, test for this, this, and this. They might even give you admin access and a lower privilege accounts access. It's really up to them how much they can give you, or up to your situation, how much information you get, but you're going to have a lot of information, let's just say, right? You might have access to certain accounts on other systems that might be able to interface with whatever you're testing. I'm just trying to give some examples here because it's kind of vague, but basically you're going to be going in with a lot of extra knowledge, extra access even. Now, in a gray box scenario, it's kind of, as you might have guessed, halfway between black box and white box. You might have some information available to you, but not everything, right? You might not have an admin account. You might just have a lower privileged account and some other information. So it's like the halfway between the black and the white box testing. And then when we talk about privilege escalation, because that's another thing you might hear a lot, when we talk about that, we're just talking about escalating our privileges, right? Going from one level of access to a higher level of access. So this could be in the traditional sense on the OSCP, right? Like you have a user account on the Linux server and you find a vulnerability that lets you get to the root account, but it doesn't have to be like that. It could just be on the web app itself. You could have access on a lower level account on the web app and then get admin access on the web app, right? You're elevating your privileges in whatever way, right? Whether it's in the context of any service, operating system level, web app level, whatever it is, you're going from a lower level privilege account to a higher level privilege. That one's pretty self-explanatory there. Now, Active Directory, right? That's something we talk about a lot lately on this channel, at least. That's just a Microsoft thing, basically. It's a it's basically Microsoft's way of managing groups and users within an internal network. I mean, I think, I don't know the statistics, but it's probably got to be 90-95% of companies or more even use Windows Active Directory, because it's really like the industry standard when it comes to, access control and setting up groups and users with different permissions and things like that. And yeah, Active Directory is just like the easiest way for companies to manage that stuff. And so when I talk about Active Directory, all I'm talking about is Microsoft's service to basically manage levels of access to different users and groups that they define. So anytime, you guys probably, if you guys work in pretty much anywhere really, because almost all the businesses are online nowadays. If you have a Windows computer that your company gave you, right? Chances are that's connecting to Active Directory within your company's organization, right? So yeah, that's all that is. You'll learn more about that as you watch my playlist on Active Directory. And beyond that, enumeration, right? We talk about that a lot on OSCP. You might have heard that a lot, and maybe you don't know what that means. Basically, all enumeration is try harder, right? Like look more into something, right? Look at every possible thing you can, right? Enumerate all the possible things that you could do, right? So for example, if I see that FTP is running, I want to enumerate the FTP service. I want to see, okay, what software is running FTP, and okay, what version is that? Does it have any known vulnerabilities? Can I log into the FTP server with anonymous access? Okay, I can, cool. Can I read files on the server? Can I write files to the server? Can I download files from the server, right? I'm just gonna keep looking at every possible thing, right? Enumerate all the possibilities. That's basically what enumeration is. And then the last thing that I wanna mention was POC. So that's proof of concept. So if there's an exploit out there, someone might have done a proof of concept, like here is in theory how I exploited this. It's normally pretty hands-on, like actually exploiting it. Like a researcher did a write-up, basically. If you've ever seen a write-up before in a CTF, it's kind of like that. It's just a theoretical proof of concept walkthrough of how they actually were able to exploit it. It's going to be pretty generic typically. It's not going to give away how to exploit, like say Amazon.com or something, right? It's going to be pretty generic, but it's going to show you hands-on step-by-step how the researcher was able to exploit the vulnerability. So they're really handy for us as pen testers, for sure. And then let me just cover methodology really quick. I say the term methodology a lot. That's basically thought process. So what is my thought process when I see X or when I see Y, right? What am I thinking? What steps am I going to go through when I see a certain thing to efficiently figure out how to hack it, basically? So that's all methodology is, and it's something you develop over time through your pen testing career, and it's very, very important as well. So hopefully this video helped you. I know it was a lot of talking. My throat's getting a bit dry here myself after 13 minutes of rambling, but hopefully this was of help to you guys and really demystified a lot of the jargon you might hear on this channel or elsewhere. If there's any other terms, because there's so many terms I know I haven't covered still, there's a lot to cover in this field. So let me know in the comments section below what are some terms that I didn't cover that you would like to know about, and I'll see if I can get that handled. And I will see you guys over in these beginner videos. If you want to get started there, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and hit the like button as well. I'll see you guys right over there. Thanks for watching.